Hello everyone, welcome to my channel. This is my personal channel, A.W. Finnegan, author of The Sleeper Agent, where I talk about elements in the book. And in this video, we are going to talk a little about birds and biowarfare, because birds have been cited as a means to spread disease to an enemy country, which I have specific quotes in here. The average person has absolutely no idea, but after, obviously, you'll see some three-ring binders over there. That's all like the research I did for my book, and I was gathering so much evidence about, because people think this is just somehow in the realm of conspiracy theory, but it's absolutely very well documented. Biowarfare is a thing and was documented from a very early time, much earlier than people generally think. And that's all discussed in my book, The Sleeper Agent. And I draw from like USDA conferences, I draw from scientific papers, I draw from only official sources, right? And yeah, I mean, people would be absolutely shocked to know the extent to which this stuff was studied and developed for nefarious purposes in biological warfare. Yeah, I mean, I even have the first American president, George Washington, talking about the British using smallpox as a weapon against the Continental Army. That was 1776. So obviously, they understood the significance of it from a very early time. And then over, a few hundred years, it was developed in a much more concentrated manner, and they had these methods. And one of the scientists that my book largely revolves around, Eric Traub, was perhaps you could say he was probably the most talented and knowledgeable, and he was like the all-star VIP bioweaponeer in the entire world. And that's why he worked for so many different countries throughout his life. And I think when I really look at it, yes, he became a double agent for the KGB, but I'm kind of thinking, I'm leaning towards him being a triple British agent. And if you think about it, the Soviet Union was more or less a creation of British intelligence. Like, I have correspondence with where they're saying, Lord Milner wants the Bolsheviks in power. And there was also a book written by this guy, Dorian Blair, called Russian Hazard. The Adventures of a Secret Service Agent. The Adventures of a British Secret Service Agent in Russia. Yeah. And they had tons of British intelligence people over in the Soviet Union when they were putting the Bolsheviks in power. So it was kind of like a monster that British intelligence created. But back to birds. I actually had the idea to make this video because lately I've been working on this book at Trine Day, helping somebody. It's a book it's called Blue Butterfly, Inside the Diary of an Epstein Survivor. Oh, I'm helping this author kind of get her book into final form. She's on the cover there. That's the author. She's not the Epstein survivor, but she's writing it for a friend. She's writing it. Her friend was an Epstein survivor. So, but it's a really great book. I'm honored to be helping her. And so I'm basically like proofreading and stuff like that, and trying to catch whatever typos I can find, and and I'm also doing some fact checking or whatever. But we're bringing it to its final form. It's a great book. It's just absolutely wonderful work. Like her style of writing is just really brilliant. And well, there was a dialogue in the book between her and her friend. She was talking about how Jeffrey Epstein on his Little St. James Island had a renowned ornithologist over there at one point. And for anybody who doesn't know, an ornithologist is somebody who studies birds. And her friend, who she's writing for, Juliet, and Juliet has also appeared in articles and stuff talking about her experience being trafficked by Epstein. Juliet Bryant. And there's a discussion in here. You're like, why do you think an ornithologist would be there, and why would a guy who studies birds be there? And she said, well, if you think about it, birds, if somebody wanted to spread disease, birds would be the perfect thing to do it. And I was like, I was just like, man, she might be the only person I know who's actually like thought about that connection. And I was like, that's exactly what I found in the sleeper agent. I reached out I told her, I said, your friend Juliet is on point. Birds, and this is what I found in the sleeper agent. Migratory birds and birds were always the perfect vectors. That, like birds along with insects. And they were kind of like part and parcel. Birds and insects, because the birds would carry the diseases all over the place, but then you'd have the insects as an intermediary taking the diseases from the birds and then bringing it to humans, oftentimes. That's so, and I told her how, Eric Traub had talked about migratory birds, and it was Eric Traub who was releasing ticks on shorebirds at Plum Island to spread. Well, at the time he was telling them that, oh, these ticks, they will just cause a bullseye rash, but it's harmless. But in reality, he was basically attacking us right under our noses, because it wasn't so harmless, right? And at the time, those were called simulation tests or simulant tests. You infect an insect or a bird with a harmless simulant bacteria, and then you release them into the environment, and you see how they spread out, right? That's the gist of it. That's how it went down. But basically, he had loaded those ticks up with all sorts of these exotic diseases and attacked us right under our noses. So, but I was saying, she is on point with this. And the American Biological Warfare Program, we did have a bird program, the Avian Vector Program. And I talked about that in the chapter on the simulant tests. Here we go. So it was an avian program, avian vector research. And I talked about how Eric Traub said in 1942, he mentioned the role of migratory birds being able to spread rare diseases like Newcastle disease virus. And then in the following decade, a large-scale surveillance program known as Project Starbright was initiated in the Pacific Ocean to study migratory birds and the diseases they harbored. According to a published journal by Roy McLeod, Strictly for the Birds, the military and the Smithsonian's Pacific Ocean Biological Survey Program, 1963 to 1970, the Smithsonian Institute held military contracts for the Army Chemical Corps from 1963 to 1970, spending considerable time in the Pacific to study the annual patterns of bird life, and the staff was even asked to feed mosquitoes on the birds and have the blood sent in for analysis without an explanation why. Now, they had a bird program far before 1963. In the 1950s, Eric Traub was running it. And that's why when Eric Traub was over here, he was traveling between New York and then Colombia in Central America. He was back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. And what I noticed was he was always traveling down to Colombia when the birds were heading south, right? And then he would always come back up north when the birds were flying back up north. That's what I noticed. And of course, it's because he was running this avian vector program, insects and birds. So that was a big part of the biological warfare program. And unfortunately, these idiots who let Eric Traub run the biological warfare program allowed him to spread all these diseases all over the United States and now all over the world too. And you know, people are like, well, why would they have a biological warfare program when it could come back on them? I don't know. They do a lot of I mean, think about nuclear weapons. How illogical are nuclear weapons if they were ever used? It would be the end of the world. But that didn't stop them from developing them. Well, with biowarfare, you don't have that end of the world scenario, but you have diseases being spread all over the place. And, you know, they really did think that they could control the spread to be only directed at the enemy and no one else. They really thought that because they're idiots. And that's another, you know, that's basically why they did all this, because they're idiots. And war is very illogical, and war and weapons of warfare are also very illogical, but it doesn't stop them from doing it. It doesn't stop them from developing it. And when you have something that could be released without ending the world, they would rather do that than release nuclear weapons. I really don't think anyone's dumb enough to use nuclear weapons. I really don't. But I do think they're dumb enough to use biological weapons, and it's been done many, many times. But yeah, I really thought that was brilliant of Juliet to have said that. And it was because I haven't heard anybody make that connection yet. And it was a big part of the biological warfare program. And so like zoonosis was also a big part of the biological warfare program, turning animal diseases to human diseases. And that's why Eric Traub was such a skilled bioweaponeer, because he was a veterinarian. People look at him and say, oh, well, he's not a real doctor, so how could he be so? Because veterinarians are the best bioweaponeers. And veterinarians understand zoonosis, and they understand a diverse number of different immune systems, right? And he was particularly skilled in the art of adaptation, adapting animal diseases to new species, like adapting a disease that only affects one species to all these other species of animals and humans, right? And that's why before the days of genetic engineering technology, they modified diseases by running things through different animals. You can look that up if you don't believe me. That's how it was done. It was called serial passages, animal passages. Serial animal passages. And Eric Traub was very skilled in this, and he would adapt things to new species. And he had very, very interesting methods in doing so, and it often involved the use of viruses, animal viruses, in combination with whatever he was trying to adapt to a new species. And I followed his work. I collected every single paper he ever published. A lot of it was in German. I had to translate it to English. But I really wanted to know. I wanted to know bad enough that I took the time to do that, because I was just like, I just knew he was a very important guy in the biological warfare race, and my intuition was on point. He was actually the guy who discovered immune tolerance, which is the chronic immunosuppression, and it's basically the underlying mechanisms behind chronic disease. All chronic diseases are the result of immunosuppression or immune deficiency that allows for a disease to continue on in a chronic manner, and often involved the reactivation of latent viruses. Because when your immune system goes down, all of these viruses that you have within you start reactivating from head to toe. And it kind of basically like turns your body against you. So my book, The Sleeper Agent, has all of this information on birds, and especially animals and zoonosis. And that was Eric Traub's specialty. And the insects, like I said, were part and parcel of the bird program. It kind of like, you're kind of creating like an eco-weapon, and a weapon that can be facilitated through an ecosystem and all of its participants, birds, animals. And oftentimes what he would do is he would adapt a disease of birds to all the land animals. He would adapt them to all the land animals, and then he would adapt those diseases of land animals to birds as well. Like, he was able to adapt foot and mouth disease virus to birds. He was able to adapt a bird spirochete, which was Lyme disease. He was able to adapt that bird spirochete to all of the land animals too, and the ticks. So that was kind of his thing. But yeah, I have the audiobook done and stuff. I'm selling it on my website if anybody wants the audiobook version. I also have the audiobook ebook bundle for $25. So that's good, because when you're listening, I don't list all of the sources in the audiobook, but if you have the ebook, you can check everything that I'm saying is backed up by a citation to official research, right? And I went all out in backing up everything I'm saying to official papers, congressional hearings, conferences, USDA conferences, all sorts of stuff. And I also had a high-level biodefense source through John Loftus, not John Loftus himself. It was actually somebody else who I did meet, but I can't name them. And they were the ones who, that person was the one who was able to give me all of the hints of what to look into. And John Loftus wrote a memorandum based on all the stuff he said to him, but it was all coming from that biodefense source. And so that person was also a big source for this book. Like, I went at this as though I was trying to make a case in a court of law. So you have testimony from people, you have documents, you have everything you can find that would be considered official sources of information, and that's what I did. So that is about it. Hope everybody had a good summer. I can't believe summer is already gone. It sucks. I wish summer just would stay here all the time, here in Cape Cod. But yeah, I had a good summer. I basically just was riding all summer, riding my bike, my BMX bike, and doing a lot of tricks. And I mentioned in the other video how I got kicked off the bike trail because of a forest ranger. Well, I just decided, I stayed off the bike trail for a while, and then I just decided, I was like, fuck that guy. Who listens to forest rangers anyway? And I decided to go back on the bike trail, so I've been back on the bike trail. And it's funny, when I went back on the bike trail, the swan wasn't walking anymore. The swan, the elf. She looks more like an elf. It's just this girl. She's so funny. Well, she wasn't walking anymore, and then finally, after like a month, I saw her again. But she hasn't really been walking anymore. No sign of Tinkerbell. No sign of her friend Tinkerbell. Oh, that was funny. Yeah, she was with some girl. Looked exactly like Tinkerbell from Peter Pan over the summer. I was laughing. I was trying not to laugh. I was going by them. But, yeah, it looked exactly... And she looks exactly like an elf, so it's like... Oh, it's so funny. I met this other girl on the bike trail, actually, like a week or two ago. Really pretty. Actually, she was walking the same stretch of mile that the swan, the elf, walks on. And that was so funny. Yeah, like, she's really cool. And I just, because I had seen her all summer, but I didn't go up to her and talk to her. And then finally, I was just like, hey, what's up? And she has, like dirty blonde hair. She's really pretty. And I started talking to her. And I was like, I told her a little about the elf. And I was like, we were going by the dirt road where she always comes out. She like lives in the woods or something. It's some dirt road that like descends into the woods, and she's always coming out of it. And I'm like, where she like live? She lives in the woods or something. And I'm like, we were going by that dirt road. I was walking. I was riding my bike. The girl that I was talking to was like walking, and we were walking by it. And I go, yeah, see that dirt road? I was like, there's an elf that lives down there. He was like, what? I'm like, yeah, it's this girl that likes me or something. I don't know. And she plays all these. I said, but she plays all these games, so I stopped talking to her. And like, yeah, she's like an elf or something. She like lives in the woods down there. So funny. But yeah, it's pretty funny too, because like after I talked to the girl, like she wore the same thing almost every time I seen her. She was always in black with a white hat. And after I talked to her, I saw her again. She was like all done up, like highlights in her hair and everything. I was like, whoa. Very, very pretty. So basically the swan has competition now. The swan has some serious competition now, because this girl's really pretty. And I hope to keep talking to her. But yeah, it's pretty funny. She really does look like an elf, that girl, that other girl. She really looks like an elf. I really think she might be an elf. And, like, her mom's like a gnome. So, it was probably like the wee folk that lived down there in that woods. It's probably like a whole community of them, you know? That's what I have this little joke about that, and it's just like, all this stuff that just, I don't know, I'm such an idiot. But that's a topic for another day. But yeah, head over to the Sleeper Agent if you want to buy the book. Well, actually, I don't have any physical copies left anymore. You're gonna have to go to either Amazon or Trine Day, or there's also Barnes & Noble and the usual sellers. But if you want the audiobook, then you have to head specifically to my website. The audiobook and the ebook are sold for $25, right? $25, which is good. So, if you want to learn more about this birds and biological warfare thing, head on over to the Sleeper Agent and get yourself a copy of the audiobook, ebook, or find the physical book elsewhere. And we will take it from there, and I will see you in another video. So, with that said, everybody take care of yourself, be yourself, build yourself, and I will see you on the other side.